how I feel, and I think probably lots of people in Penticton feel, that the bike can be such an inner, it really touches on a lot of these issues we have in Penticton, like housing affordability, carbon emissions, the environment, public health.
Welcome back to the Deep Fryer Podcast with Joe Fries. I'm Joe Fries, and with me on this episode is Matt Hopkins. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Matt, by all accounts, is a mild-mannered government worker with a young family. He's a kick-ass golfer and happens to love Penticton. He's also a vociferous advocate for the expansion of the cycling network in Penticton. But more importantly, he's a well-researched vociferous advocate for the expansion of the cycling network, which is why I had to have him on the show. Is that fair, Matt?
I think, Joe, I think you've just touched on everything. I think that's completely accurate. You've got the description probably to a T. Right?
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's start then. Give us your cycling bona fides. Are you a weekend warrior, a daily commuter? Do you even own a car?
So I do own a car. I can say that first. I think for me, how I got into this was I grew up in the West Kootenays and Trail in Nelson, and probably like most people, I rode a bike as a kid, and I remember having a paper route at 11 or 12 and saving some money and buying a really nice bike and just the freedom that gave me.
Yeah.
And so I always had those memories with me. But basically, fast forward, I went to university in the States. I played college golf, and after I did that, I moved to Vancouver. And I was living in Vancouver for probably 10 years before I moved to Penticton. But anyway, in my time in Vancouver, I was not a car owner because I was making $35,000 a year and had student loans to pay. Owning a car was like akin to going to the moon or something, I tell people. So I was a transit user, and I lived on the SkyTrain, rode the SkyTrain every day, took buses all the time, had my 2-zone bus pass for $110 a month. And I met my now wife in 2011. And my wife is a person who, when I met her, she was riding her bike to work. She lived on the west side of Vancouver. She was riding her bike to work across the Burrard Bridge to St. Paul's Hospital. And my wife is not I was so out of sort of cycling at that point. Like, I would never equate my wife to being, at that time in my life, someone who I thought was a cyclist. Like, she wasn't fearless. She wasn't riding a bike that was $10,000 in a spandex outfit and a really fancy helmet. She was riding her bike in her regular clothes and an upright bike that probably was worth $100. And it just really struck me because I could not believe that someone was riding their bike to work in Vancouver, and it wasn't the person I thought. Like, she just wasn't a person that struck me as a cyclist, and it's a woman too, which are underrepresented in cycling generally. So based on my wife's experiences, it really, like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, man, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try riding my bike to work, because from her place, I was working in downtown Vancouver as well at the time. And actually, my wife's family gave me a bike. Like, they have an orchard out in Oliver, and somebody had just left a bike there like years ago. It was a discarded bike that was probably worth $20. And they gave it to me, and I fixed it up a little bit and started riding my bike to work. And I just loved it. Like, I just loved it. It gave you a little bit of exercise in the morning, and it felt great. And so I loved that part of my day. So that's sort of where it started for me, I guess. And sort of where that bug got into me about like riding my bike, and I was starting to use it all the time for all sorts of different things. And so
that normalized it for you.
Yeah, that normalized it for me. Exactly, that normalized it for me. And I at the time too, I had a work colleague, another woman who was riding from almost Burnaby. I worked at Rogers Arena downtown, and she was riding from almost Burnaby in. And then similar to my wife, someone I didn't think of as like a typical cyclist, but she was riding her bike to work every day. And those experiences and those, I guess, leaders in my life sort of got me getting into it. That's where it started.
Yeah. So how much do you ride these days?
So at this point, I'm on my bike probably almost every day. To answer your original question, I don't do any generally like recreational riding. I don't have a bike that I'm going to ride to Oliver or compete in an Ironman or anything like that. But like most days, like I take my kids to to daycare and before school care on my bike every day. And, like you said, I'm a government worker who's been working at home for 3 years, but I am going to start going into our office here downtown. So I do it for those purposes, or just transportation. Like, my kids go down, I got to get 4 liters of Homo milk, like stuff like that. Right. I mean, that's kind of what I use it for. And the exercise, I guess, is a bonus, but yeah.
You do own a car though, right?
I do. Yeah. So my wife and I do own one car. And that's one thing that I think people think is like everything I write, like sometimes people might think of me as an anti-car person. And I don't think I'm necessarily that. I mean, I see how expensive they are, right? And what they do to our, like the environment and but I think like the number one thing is cost, right? Like that's what I'm really mindful of. Like I was saying, like when I lived in Vancouver, I didn't have one until I met my wife and we had 2 incomes. Then I could do it. And maybe if you were to psychoanalyze me, you'd probably think, maybe it's like part of my upbringing. Like I remember as a kid, like I didn't have a bad upbringing or anything, but like my mom did not have a lot of money. We were a low income household, and to keep a car on the road was tough. Like that was tough and it was expensive. Right. And so I remember those experiences as a kid, like my divorced parents sharing a car. Like, I mean, you can imagine how well that would go, right? Divorced people sharing one car and trail. That was unbelievable. So like if someone was to psychoanalyze me, they'd probably go, yeah, that's probably why you hate cars. But I don't think I do. I don't think I do necessarily. But when I think of this stuff, Joe, like when I think of like the advocacy portion of it, I think, I try to convince politicians and people I speak with all the time, like we collectively cannot afford these cars. Like they're too expensive and our incomes are low, like in Penticton, and the cars are getting more and more expensive and the gasoline is expensive. And so I think about that aspect a lot of the just how hard it is to keep a car going. So, any more trips that we can encourage through walking or cycling or transit can help people that are on the lower end of the income spectrum.
I'm going to come back to that in a bit, how much parking costs. It's a cost in new construction. It's a big cost. And that goes to housing affordability. I'm going to come back to that.
Sure.
But first, a big part of your advocacy comes through Penticton and Area Cycling Association. Just give us a snapshot. That has a very expansive scope, everything from trail building to lobbying to organizing events. Can you just kind of sum up what your role is and what the group does?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Penticton Area Cycling Association, that's the organization that sort of my advocacy work goes through. And we've been an association for probably 15 years now, might even be a little bit longer. We represent all aspects of cycling, and we've had our fingers in all aspects over the years. I think for the most part, what we're known for and what we do most is mountain bike trail building, trail work. We're basically the stewards of the Three Blind Mice Trail Network, which is highly used and really popular network of mountain bike trails, above Penticton, basically. So that's our bread and butter.
You kind of touched on it that in some of the stuff you write in the media, you come across as anti-car and stuff. And so this issue, cycling in Penticton, particularly since the Lake Bike Route has come on stream, it seems like it's so polarizing. I'm wondering if it actually is. If so, is it the media driving it? Is it a loud minority? Is it like this everywhere else?
That's a really good question. And I know, when we were talking earlier, you were kind of mentioning this to me. And one thing that I thought about is, I don't think that we're that different than in other communities, other than it's newer to us. Yeah. Like, it's funny, I mean, you look back, and I was talking about the Burrard Bridge bike lane. Like, there's a history that goes back of that to the 90s. And, the government at the time tried to put it in. People went absolutely crazy. They ripped it back out, then it went back in 10 years later. And it's the over 1 million trips a year over that bridge on a bike. It's the busiest bike lane in North America. So, and it's funny, like I actually had a counselor reach out to me. We had last year, maybe a couple of years ago now, I think it was last year, a sitting city councilor with the city of Victoria reached out to me. And as it was getting finished, he said, and I feel like Victoria is probably 10 years ahead of us on a lot of this stuff, cycling advocacy. And he said, just watch. What you're going to get is people will start reaching out and say, nobody's using this thing. Right. and I mean, the guy his name's Matt Dell, and he just predicted the future, because that was exactly what started. But I think, to answer your question, I think it can be a little bit polarizing. I think it's new, you know, and that's where I wonder what your thoughts are on it too. Is it a small group of people? That's my understanding of it. I mean, I don't have great polling on it. I will say any of the polling that the city has done previously there's been fairly broad support, and sure, you can poke holes in that survey work and say, hey, that's not Ipsos read, or it's not as accurate as it could be. But to me, I go, well, it's the best we have. Like, all other than that, we have anecdotes on Facebook or other places of people that are passionately against it, and there's a group of those folks, and they believe in it strongly. But to be honest, I don't see it as a huge backlash. But I mean, maybe I'm out of touch. I don't have any specific details where I can say this is really, really unpopular. But I mean, maybe you do.
My view is tainted because I'm in the media, and so I'm all of it. I'm in the mix of it, and I see it all and I get it all. I think it is fairly evenly divided.
Yeah.
In non-support, because I'm surprised at some of the people who complain about it. Personally, I think the bike lane's cool. I have kids, and we like to ride our bikes on it. It's still a bit place like Atkinson Street where it's new. It still catches me off guard a bit, but it did downtown as well. But I'm kind of used to it now, and so I think we'll get over it. But that's just my personal opinion.
You know what? Yeah, and you know what I think, like, and you mentioned that about the route itself, and I think, like, people talk to me, like I talk to counselors about specifics on the route all the time, and it can always improve. Like, I think there's definitely improvements that can be made, and can it look better? I would love it to look better. Can it be a little bit safer? Sure. Yeah, there's things that we can do to make it better.
Okay, let's have some fun here. I gave you a homework assignment, and I said, imagine you had 1 year and carte blanche to remake Penticton's transportation network. What would it look like?
Okay, so the one thing I thought right away that stood out was Main Street. Like, Main Street, I moved here and I'm like, why is Main Street a highway? The highway's down, like, it's like 500 meters away. Why does it? And so, I remember sitting in he probably thought I was crazy, but I was sitting in a room with Ian Chapman, director of engineering with the city of Penticton, and I went, Ian, why does this road look like this? This is an abandoned highway. Why can't we change it back to a local street? Like, so I look at it and go, man, this thing's 5 lanes wide. It really is scary to walk down Main Street, particularly like south of the library, right? Like, I look at it and go, why doesn't this thing get reworked to be a local street where someone who could bike on it, or like, you could have a bus that goes rapidly down it, or we plant the odd tree in there so it's like somewhat nice place to walk. Like, I walk down it and it's like, it's so wide and so scary to cross that I don't get why that. I think, to answer your question, that would be my thing, is that I would rework Main Street for other transportation methods. I think it works really poorly for everyone outside a car. And it's just like so not fun to be on for anyone else that's not in your car. So I think that's, and I look at, like, my son, right? Like, and these things become maybe more clear when you have kids, but like, my son goes to Carmi school, right? And like, I think of that, and like, there's a big part of that Carmi school catchment that is on the other side of Main Street. The house is on the other side of Main, right? And I go, I watch when school comes out, right? And there's no kids walking down to the foot of Carmi Avenue because it's dangerous, right? The parents aren't going to let them cross there, or like, walk by Chevron, the 2 big curb cuts, then cross 5 lanes of traffic, then walk back, by Little Caesars Pizza and the Dairy Queen. Like, that's a horrible place for a 6-year-old to walk, right? So I think of stuff like that more, but Main Street, particularly like out of the downtown, to me, that's just, I'd plant a tree or 2, maybe get us some shade. That'd be my number one. That'd be my number one for sure.
That's a nice straight shot from one end of town to the other that has so much potential. Now that you mention
so much potential, and it's like everything's on the street, right? Like, everything's there.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think of, like, I live near the hospital, right? And I just think, man, like, if I could just take a straight shot on my bike to the mall, I could be there in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I go to the bottom of Carmi and you cannot make a left. That's an illegal turn, right? And so, like, then I got to go up on the high side, or like, I'm going to go down Duncan Avenue on my bike and then make a left onto Main. Like, that's crazy, right? So some of these things, like, you think, one thing I would say is, like, when you start doing this bike lane advocacy and you start to get into this, or like these things become really granular in your head, like specific spots of the street, right? You just know, man, riding my bike and making a left on Duncan is going to suck, right? Or it's just like, that's not going to be fun. And like, yeah. So that's what I'd say. That's my answer.
I like it. I think you should flesh it out a bit.
The Deep Fryer podcast is presented by the South Okanagan Event Center right here in Penticton. We have a free pair of tickets to give away for every episode this season. Upcoming events include the Penticton Bees playoff games, Blippi, the Wonderful World Tour on May 19th, TLC and Shaggy Hot Summer Nights Tour on July 15th, Bonnie Raitt with special guests Royal Wood coming September 22nd, and Skid Row and Buck Cherry on October 10th. Check out our socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter for details. Or pick up tickets directly at valleyfirsttix.com.
Okay, so I want to go back to Pacca again. And with the greatest of respect, I think Pacca is impressive as an organization because it's an effective local lobby group, because it is able to harness the power of its members. And I'm going to give you some examples. One I think of is when the bike route opened in 2021, Pacca made damn sure that there was a good turnout for that. You know, it was Reiner's members to get out there, and there was a good turnout. It was smoky as hell, but there were cyclists there. I remember it was a council meeting. I think it may have been last year. Former Mayor Vasilaki remarked that he had gotten 100 emails overnight from the cycling community about some issue that was on the agenda, and he couldn't believe it. He was just astounded.
Yeah.
Now, more recently, in this past December, there was a strongly worded statement from you about Councillor Amelia Boltley and the bike route. She had put forward a motion to halt any work on it. She came back with an equally strongly worded statement. What was that all about?
Well, so during the campaign, like I think, you know, to your point, you know, to our advantage, we have become a stronger organization like the last few years, and our membership is behind us big time.
Okay.
And I mean, they believe in what we do, and the, you know, our numbers are growing every year. And I think going into the election, it was important to us to see where all the candidates stood, right? I mean, we knew that the bike lane, it is contentious. There's people who don't like it, and there's people who passionately don't like it, right? So of course that's going to come up in the election. And so, you know, we were mindful of that, and we had sort of gone on this journey with many of these counselors as well as this thing went along, right? Like, I mean, I think we're understanding of, you know, some of the abuse and stuff these counselors have taken for making these decisions. So one thing that we wanted to make sure of is that during the campaign, we knew where every counselor stood, because we were actually in a position where we were going to endorse candidates for that. And we did endorse candidates for that election. And so we asked a number of questions. Do you plan to support finishing a bike lane as it's currently planned? And we made it that simple because, you know, there was planning in place to finish this thing in 2023, right? It was a question that, like, I would imagine you as a journalist, like you get these politicians and you want to answer them a question and you want to get a direct answer. Yes. Right. And that's sometimes
on the record.
Hard. Yeah, exactly. On the record. Like, give me your answer. Don't give me fluff. Yeah. So, you know, every single counselor that ended up getting elected said they supported finishing the project as planned. Right. So that's great. And so, you know, we didn't support every counselor that we didn't endorse every counselor that won, and we didn't endorse Amelia Boltley for other reasons. And we had, you know, we supported counselors that supported the bike lane as it went along who didn't get through, like Katie and Frank. And so when that motion came through, I mean, that bothered us as a club, right? Because we were lied to. I mean, that's the way we felt, is that we asked a pretty direct question and we got an answer. And, you know, in Councillor Boltley's statement, she said she, you know, supported finishing it as planned. I mean, she had some other answers that, you know, we weren't completely behind, but she said she supported finishing it as planned. And so when that motion came out, I guess we felt blindsided. Like, it came out, you know, on a Thursday or Friday. You know how these council things come out. They come out on a Thursday or Friday, and then there's a vote Tuesday, right? Yes. And it just totally does not play into the strength of a volunteer bike organization, right? Like, we have one half-time employee. We are not like, this is not the NRA. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, as far as a lobbying group goes. So it blindsided us. And I guess me personally, as the person sort of on this beat for Pacca, felt, and I've had many conversations with Amelia over the years about the bike lane, particularly the last time she ran, more so. But, I guess I just felt blindsided in that I felt like if you're going to, of course you can change your position. You're a month in, it bothers me and I don't think it's right, but I think certainly you can change your position. I think us as an advocacy organization, when you've given us an answer, I think we're owed a heads up and say, hey, somebody make a phone call and say, hey, Matt, I've done a 180-degree change on my position on this, and here's why, right? Like, I think that's fair and honest and upfront. So yeah, it was strongly worded. We were angry. I mean, and we did get a lot of people that, we put out an email that weekend, and we did get a lot of support, and it went narrowly in our favor. And I just thought, in my view, I mean, it was in bad faith. I thought it was in bad faith too, frankly. I mean, one of the things she said was that, and you probably have the wording of it, but it was about, she wanted to halt it until you could get a better idea of ridership. That was one of the things that was in there. And I was jumping up and down and going, this thing is not finished. It's like a house where you have a basement finished and you haven't finished the first floor, and you want to know, how's the occupancy going? Well, the thing's not finished. No one's going to live in a half-built house, because I'm just so involved in this. I just remember all the steps. But it's like, when we went to council about this thing, it was about a lake-to-lake bike route, right? Ultimately, how it ended up being constructed is in 4 phases, right? Like, as an advocacy organization, we want the thing finished all at once. City doesn't want to do that, which is fair. We understand that, right? And it's in terms of funding the thing, it's been awesome for the city because they've got all sorts of grants for it, because they've built it in pieces and they've just been in the queue for all these grants. So from a financial point of view, it's worked really well. I think for us as an advocacy organization, it's been more challenging because there's a decision every year, right? There's a decision every year to keep it going or not. Right. And so there's a funding decision every single year, as opposed to ripping the Band-Aid off once and going, yes, we're building this thing. So, it's not played into our hands perfectly, but, to your point about our group and our association, I think that it helped us huge that we do have an engaged membership and people who believe in this issue. Because if we didn't, I don't think we wouldn't be here. I mean, there's no doubt.
No. Where do things stand with city council now? You have some support on council, some non-support on council. Any rifts? Or the bike lane's damn near done, or I think it's gonna be done this year. How are things looking?
I think pretty good. I mean, we have, working with the council I actually enjoy that aspect of what I do. Like, I like talking to people about this. Like, it's kind of my bread and butter, and I could talk about it forever. But we have some strong supporters. Like, we have, Campbell Watt's a strong supporter, and obviously Isaac Gilbert's a strong supporter, and the mayor's a strong supporter as well. So, those are our, I think the last council, we really had 4 or 5 strong, constituent or officials that were on board. Now we have 3, and Ryan supported continuing the project. So, I think of Ryan as a supporter. I mean, I'm constantly talking to these councillors. Like, one thing that, like, I really want to see. I don't know that we're ever going to get James Miller's support on it. He's voted no on it many times, and he still comes to our, he comes to our AGM and shows up and listens. And so I'm always trying to keep the conversation going, I guess. Right. And so I think for me, one person that I feel like it would make sense that we would get her support is Councillor Conans. And so I met with her before the election, and, one of the things, like we touched on a little bit earlier, but she's really into housing affordability. Like, that's an important part of her campaign. And, I think she was taking some college courses on affordability. And like I was talking at the start, like, I just see the next most expensive thing other than rent for folks is transportation. Right. So I'm constantly holding out hope that we will get her support, because it's just really hard to run a car for people that can't afford one. And, you look, like, you see it, right? I mean, rent $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 for a 1-bedroom unit in town, and a car is $12,000 a year to run or something. I think it's 11 average cost of car ownership. And so, And, the census says, I think the last census said the average income here, median, is like 57,000 a year household. So I'm going to keep trying that angle because no, I don't think anyone would consider my politics to be right of center, but I can totally get behind spending less than you earn, right? Like as a principle, right? Like we all have to do that if we want to retire or we want to thrive or we want to pay for our kids' education. So I always try to, lean into those aspects for folks or politicians that are more right leaning. That, hey, this is cheaper for you as a city. It's cheaper for the person as a city resident. It's cheaper for taxes. So, I keep trying those angles, but I guess a work in progress.
You've actually segued beautifully into my next question. Another guest on the show is Drew Barnes. I talked to him about housing affordability, construction costs, and I asked him about the city's striking a task force to review the OCP with an eye to amending it to encourage housing. And I asked Drew off the top of his head what people ought to be thinking about. And he said people one of the things they should think about is that in a new development, parking takes up a lot of space, like the driveway, the garage, the double garage, whatever you have that people could be living in. So maybe we should be reassessing parking requirements. So I'm curious what you think of that. Should we be banning driveways and garages, or what? Is that plausible? Is it feasible?
I am so obsessed with parking requirements. This is I don't know. I got into this subject a few years ago and I read a 700-page book called The High Cost of Free Parking. It's by a guy called Donald Shoup and a researcher from UCLA. And I'm obsessed with it. And I'm with Drew 100% on this. I mean, because parking requirements, what they do is they raise the cost of construction because there's less you can build on a lot. In the case of an underground parking space, those are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a space to build. They're really expensive. They make when you require parking on every lot, the houses get further and further and further apart, and it becomes less walkable. It prevents use of some lots. If there's not enough parking, then you're not even going to be able to build on certain lots. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. So yeah, because the more parking you build, the more cars you get. So yeah, I'm for sure I'm for repealing minimum parking requirements. I would love to see that. That's a huge sort of urban planning thing in North America right now you're seeing a lot right now. Bend, Oregon just repealed them a couple weeks ago, even places like Anchorage and Nashville in the last little while. So yeah, you talk about construction costs. I would love to see minimum parking requirements be removed and that builders build the parking that they can sell and that they want to build, not these. The other thing too is these minimum parking requirements. It's a complete pseudoscience. It's not based on anything scientific. It's like astrology. People come up with a certain number of there needs to be this many parking spots per liters in a swimming pool or holes on a golf course, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think that that's something I really believe in. And I don't know if I have the energy to try to pitch this council on it. I don't know if it's the best council for it, but these are the things I totally agree that a task force, that's the first thing. One of the first things I think they should look at in terms of housing affordability is repealing these parking requirements because they're so onerous and so expensive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I want to get your hot take on one more item.
Yeah.
We got a few letters together at the Herald about people saying the Lake Bike route should be opened up to scooters and motorized wheelchairs, all sorts of things. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. In fact, I don't, are they close to them now? Is that, you might even know better than me because I see people in them. Yeah. I see people in those motorized scooters all the time. And to me, I go more the merrier. I love it. Right. Because I'm like, wow, we've created something that a person on a motorized scooter prefers over the sidewalk. So I'm like, yahoo, I love this. Yep. Last week, I see people like kids, and I was down there today. I saw people on just a little two-wheel push scooter, like kids, or electric scooters. I think it's great. I saw a guy last week on a trike, and I stopped and I said, "Man, that's a really cool bike you have." And he said he said, it's great when you can't walk. Like he literally had a cane on the back of this thing. He can't walk, but he rides his trike up and down the bike lane. So I'm totally for that. I think that's fantastic. To me, the more the merrier that want to use it. I think it's, or skateboards and all that stuff. I think it's great.
Okay. Matt, that's all the questions I've got for you. Any final thoughts or things you want people to know about Pacca or the bike issues in Penticton, or things they ought to be keeping in their minds in these pivotal times?
Thanks for having me, Joe. I guess what I would leave you with is just how I feel, and I think probably lots of people in Penticton feel, that the bike can be such an inner, it really touches on a lot of these issues we have in Penticton, like housing affordability, carbon emissions, the environment, public health. I just think it is really a key thing that can really touch on a lot of sort of the issues we have right now in Penticton. And anyway, as the bike lane and the bike lane continues to get more and more use, I hope that our politicians and people that are making decisions see the value of it. I think moving forward of transitioning more people and giving them an opportunity to ride a bike.
Okay, Matt, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for your time.
Beauty. Thanks, Joe.